ladies and gentlemen, angry Americans around the country and around the world, I am so excited to have our returning champion, our very first ever guest on Angry Americans, one of my favorite people in the world, and one of the most inspiring, kind, generous, and cool people I know. The great and powerful Willie Geist is back.
Paul, great to be back, man. I'm glad you've already been through all the possible guests. You've gone all the way around the cycle, and now you've come back to me. It is an honor to be back. And by the way, I got to say, this is a much different podcast than that first one you and I sat together for in that little room with the whiteboard behind you, which I thought at first was the Polish consulate, and I went into the wrong building, and then I came up to there. And look at you now, man, that beautiful garage with the car and the flag and the bourbon. It's all happening for you.
And it's so much shittier than it was a year. So I talked to you April of last year, and it's going to be fun to go through like how much has changed since then.
Yeah.
But yes, I accidentally sent you to the Polish consulate, and you thought we had an ornate room, and we had this like white room with no windows at a studio. But now I'm in my garage, which may look okay because I've got this beautiful Camaro, but it actually smells terrible because I have a lot of garbage in here, and I'm in a place, an undisclosed location, where I have to actually bring the garbage to the dump.
Oh, yeah, I know that.
And the dump has limited hours, and the dump is not open on Tuesdays. And usually Ryder and I go to the dump together, and it's this big He likes it. He gets to see the trucks, and he gets to throw the glass in and break it.
Yeah.
But I've missed a couple dump windows. So it smells really bad in here, and I'm so grateful you're not here to experience that.
So just off camera, there are mountains of rotting garbage sitting next to you.
There's like, no shit, there's like 3 cans, and I got to keep it closed so that the bears and shit don't get in here.
Yeah, yeah. We got some stuff up here too. Every morning when I go out to the trash, there are raccoon prints, dusty raccoon prints on the top of every garbage bin. And I don't know how they do it, but somehow they get in there and they flip open the top a little bit. They find a banana peel or something and they yank it out. And I'm mystified by how they're doing this. But yes, I'm with you on the garbage problem.
I think this is good extra content for like Morning Joe, just outside your window to see what either animals or political operatives are going through your garbage.
If political operatives are going through my garbage, they're going to be terribly bored and terribly disappointed.
Well, let's talk about your setup. I've been asking everybody since we started this in the pandemic, where are you and how are you? How are you dealing with this? So tell us where you are, and you have a beautiful drum set behind you that I want you to tell us about, please. But also, buddy, like you and I have been talking over text, but how are you? How is the family? How are you dealing with this madness?
We're good. You know, we feel lucky on a number of counts. Number one, everybody's healthy. Nobody's been sick yet, knock on wood. We've worked hard to keep it that way. It's been, I was thinking we're into July now, and that Thursday was March 12th was when this really started. And because we were on the brink of spring break, and as of Thursday, March 12th, we were going skiing on Saturday, the 14th. And imagine the idea of that. Of course, they closed all the ski mountains and everything else. So we are an hour outside New York City. And I am sitting right now in a little, you'll see the bed over there, which I hope isn't too creepy for people, but you got a bed over my shoulder, and we're in like one of those little apartments over a garage is where I am. So these are my 10-year-old son, George's drums. I can't play them, so don't ask. He's really good at it. I'm not. My daughter's guitar is over there. They come up here and they play, and I'm planning on them becoming a huge family band. So I can retire, be their manager, siphon off a lot of their earnings, and become very wealthy myself. So far that's the plan. But we're healthy. I'm lucky to have a job where I continue to work every day. That's a blessing. There are people going through real hardship. So having to help my kids through school and do things like that is not even worth mentioning. So we're doing great.
I'm glad you mentioned the music piece, because for our returning guests, there've only been 2 now. Ron Perlman beat you to the punch.
Yeah.
But that's because he was threatening to punch Ted Cruz. And it was kind of a opportunistic moment. I texted you and said, I hope you don't mind, let's shift. I want you to be July 4th. Ron's in a Twitter fist fight with Ted Cruz, so I'm gonna put him on. Yeah. But you are, you will always be our inaugural guest. You will always be the first face on the Mount Rushmore of righteous media.
Come on.
But I am now asking a question of all follow-up guests, because you've already answered the car question. You told us about your Jeep CJ in episode 1, which people should go back and hear. It's amazing. But Willie Geist, what is your favorite band or artist?
Okay. All time is the Stones, Rolling Stones. I was raised on the Stones. My father listened to the Stones a lot. So early 80s is when I first kind of really became conscious of music as a kid, and that was Tattoo You, and then I went backward from there. My uncles all worshiped the Stones. So it was one of those things where you sort of couldn't avoid it. And the fact that they're still around and playing music, and they're running around the stage and playing, selling out MetLife Stadium and everything else. If you ask me the one band, it's the Rolling Stones. Now, I also grew up in the late 80s and early 90s in a time when hip hop was going mainstream. And I grew up in New Jersey, right outside New York City. So we'd come home and watch this show called Video Music Box, hosted by Ralph McDaniels. And it was a 30-minute video show. Remember the days when you couldn't just call up on YouTube and watch what you wanted? You'd hope you get, It Takes Two or The Symphony or like one of those great hip hop songs. And so so when I'm asked that question, it's the Stones forever, for sure. But also like hip hop of our generation that was informative about who we are and the kind of culture that we loved and the things we paid attention to. So not to be too much of a cliche, but Big Daddy Kane was my first love in the 80s. But then when Jay-Z came along, that sort of changed things for me. And it's funny, now my kids, that's their music. They listen to Kanye and they have, my daughter listens to Taylor Swift, but like hip hop is the mainstream. It became that since we were kids.
I love it. So there's another question that I've always asked everyone I've ever interviewed to work at IAVA on my team. It's kind of become a thing, right? And it worked well for me. And I was thinking about working it in this podcast and I didn't know how to do it, but you've given me an opening, right? You were a tight end or a linebacker back in the day in high school, right?
Both. Yeah.
Right? Okay. Yeah. So there's an opening here that I wanted to hit and now you've given it to me. So here is a question I asked just about everybody who ever worked at IAVA in the interview process. Willie Geist, who is your favorite member of the WuTang Clan?
Oh, do you really ask that at IAVA?
Yes, and I'll tell you afterward why.
I think ODB, probably. Old Dirty Bastard. Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, boy, that's hard. That's like picking your favorite child. I'm going to go with ODB, though.
Why ODB, Willie?
Because, I think the thing that you loved about Wu-Tang was that they were so raw and so authentic and like in some ways so unpolished. They were just speaking and growling. And I think he sort of exemplifies that when I remember an interview he did where he talked about going to pick up a welfare check in a stretch limousine just because he could. And I was like, wow, that's so like offensive, but like the fact that you're comfortable saying that out loud in an interview in some way, I have respect for. So I think he just exemplifies the Wu-Tang way of life.
That was on brand for ODB.
Yes.
And you will know, I will share with you that in my 15 years at IAVA, ODB is by far the most popular answer. But here's the intricacy of the question. Yeah. So the question, first of all, is a culture question. It's a culture fit. Are you cool? I usually ask, do you like music? If they don't like music, they're not going to join the team, right? Because it just gets an insight into the heart of who the person is, right? And it's a culture fit. Can you respond to a question like that in a formal interview process? How do you react, right? Just watching people respond to a difficult question. But it's also something else. It's an honesty question.
Yep.
Because I usually say, do you have a favorite member of the WuTang Clan? And then they almost always say yes. And I say, who is it? If they were lying, they can't tell me. And if they lie, they're gone.
Wow.
And then you also find out that people often like ODB. And they go through a calculation in their head that you probably did at the speed of light because you're on TV. Do I say old dirty bastard or do I say ODB? And it's a deliberate choice by what you say, right? You're on a recorded interview. You're a guy on TV. I don't know if they bleep you out on MSNBC if you said the words "old dirty bastard" or not.
Think so. I think we're clean on that.
But it's a good question. I think I'm gonna. You think you're the master of the interview? Should I keep using this question or?
I think it's a good question. And I didn't say ODB because I was worried about bleep. I was using shorthand, and I also think by asking me by asking somebody to interview about the WuTang Clan, now I know that you're cool with all that. So I'm going to say old dirty bastard, because I know by asking me about the WuTang Clan, you know about the WuTang Clan, and you're not going to suddenly be offended that I use the words old dirty bastard. So it does open it up. And you're right, if you're not a hip hop fan, which you probably encountered this, or you don't know much about WuTang Clan, you just say, you know what, I didn't really listen to their music, but here's who I do like. And that's the honesty part of it, right?
Yeah. And you find out if they're a liar or not. And
right.
Lying is a problem in America right now, especially in the Oval Office.
There's a lot of lying, yes.
We'll get to that in a minute, but I wanted to ask you also, Willie, life in the pandemic, media in the pandemic. I want to give people a look behind the curtains or the lighting in people's living rooms. We've got, the bed behind you where the magic happens. We've got your son's drugs, no magic.
I don't think there's ever been any magic, even sleeping magic.
But you and I were actually texting around March. I was texting you. I was like, hey, man, are you going into the studio? Is it safe? What are you thinking? Because I got little kids. You've got kids. We're friends. I really trusted your counsel and your insight. And you were right on the money. You were like, hey, I think they're going to start to shut it down. And there was that time, I think I did Ari Melber's show, like right at the end before they stopped doing it. And I had the conversation with Lauren. I'm like, do I go in or not? She's like, if you go in, I was in like an Uber with cellophane everywhere, gloves, mask, go into the studio, but I still felt really vulnerable, right? And it was at a time when we didn't know what the hell was happening. And I frankly didn't know what NBC was going to ask, right? And they kind of gave you that, like, do what you're comfortable with.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And then eventually, and then like 2 days later, it's all shut down. And I'm doing interviews in my wife's shoe closet. You were
doing interviews, by the way, in the shoe closet. I know.
I'm sorry. Say that again, Willie.
You prefer doing all your interviews in your wife's shoe closet. I know that about you.
We're all adapting, improvising, and overcoming. But how do you do Morning Joe now? Can you break it down? Like, how are you guys doing this, and what's it like to do such a high impact show, which the president is watching every single day, in the middle of a pandemic?
So where I'm sitting now, I told you I'm in a little apartment above the garage. Downstairs in the garage, it looks more like where you are right now, except that there's an 80-inch TV monitor that serves as my backdrop. I've got lights, camera, obviously. It's got teleprompter. It's got all the things that I would have in a studio back there. And I just sit in a little stool that I got at Target and that I put together myself. It's a little squeaky. I'm working on that right now, a little WD-40. And I go in that room at about 5:30 every morning. I walk across the driveway, gravel driveway, jeans, slippers, no socks. I don't have socks on right now either. I do the jacket, the tie, and jeans on the bottom. And I walk in, I sit down, I check in with everybody. I dial in. There's called an IFB. It's a phone line you dial into. You hook it into your ear so you can hear everybody in New York, hear everybody on the show. Put on your mic, and you just start talking like it's any other show. So I started doing that. It's when you talk about March, I mentioned that week in March when it all kind of shut down school and everything else. And that following week, which would have been the week of like the 16th, I think, I was in the studio still doing Morning Joe every day. And then it was that next week where everyone said, wait a minute, we can get you up on a short-term basis in your garage if you let us come put a little camera in there. And we did think it was going to be short-term. So at first, it was real down and dirty. I think the first day, if you look at the clip, like I didn't even really have lights or anything like that. And they said, if you're going to be here, we got to come dress this up a little bit. It is still national television after all. And so they kept coming back. And the way I knew that we were in for the long haul is like every other day, an NBC truck would pull in here and they're, hey, we're here to wire you up a little tighter, put a faster internet line in. And then the moment I really knew was when I pulled into my driveway one day, and the whole trip up the road, like over a mile, there were Verizon trucks. And I thought, boy, I wonder what Verizon's doing. I followed the Verizon trucks into my driveway, and they had run a mile of cable from, you got to go out, turn left, catch another road. And they were putting a fiber line just to improve the speed and improve the connection. That's when I was like, okay, NBC knows we're going to be here for more than a few weeks. This is going to go on for a while, and here we are. So it's weird. I mean, it's like what we're doing now. I'm sitting in that garage by myself, and I'm talking to Joe and Mika, or I'm talking to whatever political guest is on that day. And, you know, I'll say to my wife in the kitchen, oh, I got to run back across the driveway. Nancy Pelosi's in the garage. I'm interviewing Nancy Pelosi, you know. Or for my Sunday, just yesterday, I interviewed Charlize Theron for my Sunday show. And this was in the afternoon. And she said, where are you going? I said, I got to go talk to Charlize Theron in the garage. You know, it's just like this weird universe that we're in. So I think, you know, because the stakes are so high with the conversations we're having, viewers are tuned in anyway. They're tuned in record numbers, and they're forgiving of some of the technical stuff. There's a little delay between us, so it doesn't have that sort of the crackle of conversation that makes, I think, Morning Joe what it is and always has been. But, you know, I got to say our technical teams have done great for Joe and Mika and for me and even for our guests. People, you know, you're doing it right now. People catch on. They know, okay, I need a little light here. I need to improve my microphone. I'll move that plant behind me. And so it's taken on, whoever you are, there's the air of professionalism to everyone's shot, because we're sort of settling into this new universe. So it's weird, but I think we're pulling it off.
You are. I mean, I'm anxious to see what Rumerator gives you for this setup you've got. I told you before we came in, Rumerator gave me a 7 for the car.
7?
Yeah.
How is that a 7? With the car alone is an 8, and then the flag.
I think that Rumerator is part of the liberal media, and I am not a Democrat, as you know. I'm an independent, but by MSNBC standards, I'm conservative. Right? It's like me and Steve Schmidt, and occasionally Rick Wilson, right? Like, no, Republicans rarely come on. You guys are the exception, okay? Morning Joe gets me, but beyond that, like on the spectrum at MSNBC, I'm probably right of center. And Rumerator, I think, has punished me for that. And I think Rumerator, on some levels, hates America.
Oh my gosh!
And I also think Rumerator is a Ford fan, and has told me that Rumerator does not like my Chevy. But here's my big thing: I actually want to take on the power of Rumerator, because I think it's entirely authoritarian and undemocratic. Like some dude somewhere just decides whether a car is more valuable than a potted plant. So I think I pushed Rumerator on this, and Rumerator, politically savvy, has not responded to these questions. But I said, why don't you leave it up to the people? Let the people vote. Let the people vote. I think it'd be great for his web traffic too. But, you know, John Heilman, your buddy Heilman with the WuTang sticker, and like, he's going to like the Guggenheim every day and changing his art so that Rumerator will. I'm not bowing down to Rumerator, man. I refuse to bow down to Rumerator. Power to the people, Willie. Help me fight this fight.
You know, you're fighting the important fight, Paul, by taking on the Rumerator website. I will not stand by and let you attack the integrity of Rumerator, mainly because I'd like a good rating. And so I do the show in the studio, so there's nothing to rate. It's just a picture of, you know, 30 Rock or whatever behind me. But they pulled out, I want to say, maybe it was on Father's Day, an interview I did with my own father a year ago, posted that picture because we were in my dad's living room before I even knew about Rumerator, so I wasn't thinking about my room rating. And they gave us a 10 out of 10.
I saw that.
So they're good to me. So I say, bless you, Rumerator. But I don't understand. I think if a man has a Camaro in his garage and it's orange, that beats any plant, any flower arrangement, any piece of art that Heilman just, you know, rented and hung on his wall so he could get the 10. I'm giving you a 10 for what it's worth, and I think if you hang in long enough, you're going to wear them down.
I appreciate that solidarity. The fight goes on.
They've really gotten to you, Paul, haven't they?
What's that?
They've really gotten to you, Rumerator.
No, I like this. I like he fucked with the wrong guy. Like I am an organizer. Okay, I've been organizing against presidents for the last 3 terms. I can take on Rumerator. And I think it's here's always my argument as an activist. If there is an injustice and you make the American people aware of it, they will respond, they will have your back, and they will mobilize. And I think the American people fundamentally think that Rumerator is undemocratic. And I think the Russians may be tampering with the Rumerator results. And so
it's a Russian operation.
This is just getting started. I'm going to create like what's the conservative version of Twitter that they're trying to create now?
Parler.
Parler, right?
Yeah. Oh, you can create an alternate?
You create an alternate Rumerator. Yeah. Like
now, what
backdrop buddy or something. I don't know.
Now you've opened my mind. You know how that face app where everyone's like, oh, this is so great. I can take a selfie and make myself look old. Yeah. It turned out it was like a Chinese government operation to get facial recognition. what if Rumerator is a Russian operation just to capture the inside of everyone's homes so they can plot the invasion?
I tell people when I interview, be careful. Like, don't put any passwords on the wall. Make sure there's nothing up there that you want, because my military background kicks in here, right?
Yeah.
But I also think there's some room shaming going on. Like, I don't have the budget that Heilman has to go to the Guggenheim and pull down something every week. I got Rumerator said I should turn the Camaro around. There's a dent on the other side of the Camaro. Okay, that's why I don't have the other side of the Camaro. And the Camaro is a work in progress, like me, like America.
Yeah.
So
why don't you turn it around? You can back it into the garage. They'd like to see a back end. I mean, they don't get to make that call. Come on. That's
what he said. He wants me to turn the car around, and I was like, "Fuck you, Rumerator. I'm not turning my car around." So
I love that you've chosen to die on this hill. Of all
I'm not, because I know I'm not going to die on this hill, man. I know. But so let's talk about. This is going to be a strange segue, but I do want to ask you before we get to Trump, which I want to get to, this new media world. You think it's going back, or is this the new normal? Like, at what point? Like, I'm up here, in an undisclosed location. You're somewhere else. In part because I don't think NBC and CNN and others are probably going to make me come into a studio till next year. But I don't. What do you think, man? Like, will this always be an option going forward? Will you guys always accept someone via Zoom from now on, or Cisco instead of in person? This kind of changes the media dynamic forever, right?
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, there's definitely no rush to go back, and we've all been checking in just to get some idea of when we might, be convening there. And I'll tell you, I went in on Monday. I filled in for Hoda and did the Today Show with Savannah, and it's a ghost town for one thing. And the other thing is, you can't conceive of the day when you turn on a light switch and flood thousands of people back into 30 Rock. I mean, if you're going to really, honest to God, distance on an elevator, you're going to get 2 people per ride going up in this massive building. It's just, as a logistical question, it doesn't work. And to your point, I think enough people have shown well enough that you can do this. I can interview Paul Rieckhoff and get the same insights, the same good insights I can get from him having to haul his ass into the studio as him in his wife's shoe closet where he prefers to be. And that's okay. That's his stuff. He likes to be surrounded by shoes. I don't know why. But yeah, I think the truth is, these setups we have here, I don't know how many there are a bunch of them for NBC anchors. I don't know that they're going to leave all of them in place forever, but I can say honestly, if they said, hey, we're just going to leave that in your garage, well, all of a sudden I can do Fridays up here. I can do Sunday. I can do my Sunday Today Show up here. That's been working out well, and not honestly lose that much. And so I think as they start looking at costs and how much it is to fire up a studio and have staff in the building and all those things, I think there's no question that our business, like every business and most things in our society, is going to be impacted in a lasting way. In a way, we thought this in March, this is a flash thing, put the camera up, we'll be back to work in a month. Now all of a sudden everyone's going, okay, what does my life look like if this is life now? And I think, the school part of it, and there's a lot of it that we don't love, but in terms of work, if you said you have to stay up here and do it, we certainly could pull it off. And so I think, I hope honestly, just as somebody who likes to produce TV, I hope we don't settle for like the crappy audio Zoom interview with everybody because they don't feel like coming in. If it's safe to come in, it's better for you and I to be sitting at a table together, look at each other in the eye. But I do think, the technology will improve from here, and this shop will look better. I mentioned I did that interview with Charlize Theron, and I'm going to mention as much as possible if I can. We were on Zoom. We did the interview on Zoom, but like she looked like she was shooting a movie, and she had something on her laptop that made it look like that. So you can imagine a world where if they say, okay, everything's going to be on Zoom for a long time, they just ship out whatever the device she had. I don't know if it was made for her or whatever. And it looked like a professional TV shot. So I think, long way to answer your question is, I think a lot of people are going to say, hey, this isn't so bad. It saves people commute time. It helps with childcare. There'll be all these factors that are mixed together. And I know for a fact there are producers on the Today Show, for example, who are like, I'm doing my job just as well, and I didn't have to drive in an hour, find a babysitter, drive home for an hour.
Right.
I'm just sitting at a different desk. I miss the interaction with people, but I don't think the work product is suffering in most cases.
Yeah, it's a giant cost benefit analysis, right? Like we're all trying to wrestle with it, and we've realized the audience is okay with a lower quality of image, right? And some glitches, but we also have advantages, like you get to see in my garage and in your garage, and you get a bit of intimacy, which I think is also strange for me. And I'll put, like, I'm very careful about protecting my family, and I get insane lunatics coming after me, and so do you. So I think for people outside of the media, they may not understand that we are still human beings and we need to be safe, right? And even being careful about everything. But you're also in an environment where, similarly, like Fox was willing to take Trump on a call-in because they knew getting him in person would be tough or impossible. So, all right, he's the president. He can call in anytime. I'm sure if Obama wanted to call in any show anytime, they would have taken him. And there's this new normal, but you're in a really unique spot. Since we talked last year, your Sunday show is amazing. It continues to blow up. Morning Joe has probably become more influential than ever. Trump is now engaging with Mika, engaging with Joe, but you seem to have avoided the fury. So 2 questions, Willie. One is, like, what's it like for you to be in that environment where you literally don't know if you're going to wake up and this guy's going to come after your colleagues, as a journalist? And separately, to my knowledge, he hasn't come after you directly. Why do you think that is? It's
funny. I've been asked that question a lot, and I think it might have been way back during the campaign. I think he tweeted about me once or something, but not since. And I think the honest to God answer is, my dad was I think this is the answer, I don't know, but my dad wrote for the New York Times in the 1980s. He had a column. And in 1984, April of 1984, he wrote a cover story about this young, brash entrepreneur named Donald Trump for the New York Times Magazine. And it was the first time, I think, Trump, as we know, he seeks the approval of the New York Times. He reminds us of that every day, constantly. He was on the cover of the New York Times Magazine, inside Trump Tower, this guy building his empire, whatever it was. And what was funny is, if you go back and read it, my dad was saying a lot of the things in his writing that people say now, where Trump says, I was #1 in my class at Wharton. And the next sentence from my dad is, a phone call to the Wharton School of Economics showed he didn't attend Wharton, and he definitely wasn't #1 in his class. He took some classes undergraduate, but he didn't go to the graduate school. So it was all this like real-time fact checking. And my dad, sort of the whole article, had his tongue in his cheek about this guy who has this inflated idea of who he is and who he's going to be. But what interesting and predictable is, what Trump took away from the whole experience was that he was on the cover of the New York Times Magazine. And he still has it in Trump Tower in his office that's framed right next to it. It meant the world, framed right next to him. So he remembers my dad, who was William E. Geist. That was his byline, Bill Geist. He remembers him fondly because he was the guy who wrote the story that led to that cover. So I think, honestly, I think he feels some kinship with maybe my dad, and I think based on that, he feels some connection. And I mean, the truth is, I also probably don't say as pointed my criticisms aren't as direct and pointed maybe as Joe's and Mika's are, or explicit maybe is a better word. So he hasn't tweeted much about me, but I mean, the stuff particularly, we typically blow it off because it's kind of, honestly, it's become boring. The act is like, oh, he's doing this again. It's not like, oh, Trump tweeted. When Trump used to tweet about it, it was like, oh my gosh, the president's tweeting. Well, he tweets about everybody. But his latest round of stuff has been particularly gross, when he's tweeting about Joe and basically accusing him of murder. A young woman who died in Joe's congressional office in Florida way back in 2001 when Joe was in Washington. So, and he just keeps putting his foot on the gas, despite the fact that the man's widower has begged for mercy and he won't get it. So Trump won't listen to that. So it's a weird thing to know that for him it's so personal with our show. But on the side that's not personal, a lot of times you'll see, I guess he flips back between the morning shows, and he will tweet about something we have just talked about. He will tweet about it 5 minutes later. I mean, he's not even hiding it. So he's watching and reacting. It was actually this morning, we had de Blasio on, Mayor de Blasio. And I was asking him about the police budget and the specifics of it. And he dropped in, he's like, we are going to paint Black Lives Matter on Fifth Avenue in front of Trump Tower. And he went on, and I came back and I said, so is that definitely happening? That's a little bit of news if you're definitely doing that. And he said it. And then 5 minutes later, Trump wrote a tweet about how outrageous it was, and that he was sullying Fifth Avenue, the beautiful Fifth Avenue, and all that. So it doesn't affect what we do or say. It doesn't affect the way I cover a story, but it is a reminder when you see the tweet, you go, oh, the most powerful guy on earth is watching and reacting to what I'm doing, sitting alone in my garage across the driveway.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that Trump has done recently that I agree with is criticize de Blasio, who I think is the only politician who's a bigger failure than Trump on some levels. And especially when we look at the pandemic, I think that de Blasio has been a disaster. I've been calling him, Mayor Disaster, and we call Trump President Mayhem. But, especially with regard to the coronavirus response, like de Blasio, in my view, was as slow and derelict and unclear and even dishonest as Trump was. But now, de Blasio is always kind of desperately trying to get something, right? So this Black Lives Matter thing, he's always late. He's kind of trolling the president.
Right.
He doesn't want to talk about the budget, which is decimating the city, right? Yeah. But at the same time, there's this, when people come to Morning Joe, they know they're in the arena, right? It's the spot. If you even say something offhand on Morning Joe, it's news, right? And because Trump's watching, and because everyone else is watching because they know Trump's watching. But I wonder if Willie, in part, Trump doesn't fuck with you because you're liked. And there is a political calculation in his head. And I called you in the first show, you're America's sweetheart. Everybody loves Willie Geist. And you're more popular now than Taylor Swift by far.
Oh, yeah. The Q rating just came out. Yeah.
And you're uniquely effective, too, because you're not bombastic, because you weren't an elected official. I think your criticisms carry more weight, especially with people who are moderate and independent and maybe just more open-minded. But I want to ask you to just, because I don't think people get to hear enough of what you think in an extended form, and it is a podcast, so I don't have to cut to a Viagra commercial or whatever you guys have on Morning Joe. But what do you think about what's going on right now? Like the state of the world, the state of our country, not Willie, the journalist, but Willie the father, Willie the patriot. What's your breakdown of where we are? And, maybe on some levels, if you're comfortable, how do you explain it to your kids? Because many of the folks listening look to you in the morning to try to, you are kind of the voice of reason on that show. They know you're a dad, you're a person that people like. What's your breakdown of this very precarious moment we're in, Willie?
It's interesting you put it that way, because I do think of it as through the prism of talking to my kids about what's going on, because this is what they're growing up in. Think about how we grew up. It was the Reagan years, and it was the first Bush years. Those are my first memories. The first time I voted, with H.W. Bush and Clinton, and then these are the formative moments. And what shitty formative moments for my kids, Yeah. To think, so a lot of what I do is just on a human level, on a personal level, is this isn't the way, and I'm not just talking about Donald Trump here, I'm talking about our political culture that I cover and live in and talk to them about. Is like, this isn't the way you talk to people. This isn't the way, the person who disagrees with you is not your enemy. They just have a different view of the world. Some of them are bad people. There's no question about it. But because someone disagrees with you doesn't mean your job is not to vaporize them and to crush them and say, all caps, I destroyed that person. That's not how the world works. And I also think, like, a big thing that I try to get across on the show, that I also talk to my kids and my wife and I talk about this, is the loud, extreme voices that dominate social media, in many cases cable news. Those are the loud, extreme voices. But there's all this other stuff happening in the country. You and I know, if we go out and have a beer and we disagree on something, we're not screaming at each other and trying to vaporize each other. If you go to a dinner party, maybe some, but people aren't screaming and vaporizing each other. It's not about tearing people down. It's about, people in this moment are particularly emotional, and I understand that. So I'm basically, what I'm trying to do with my kids is just to, like, in a way that is honest and realistic, tell them that we're going to be okay. And that because they're scared of the pandemic, they, you know, the social loss that they've had. The school was hard enough, but when you're a 10-year-old boy, you're in here playing your drums, but you're not out there playing with your buddies because you're not allowed to, or they don't want to come over because everyone's still concerned about it. That social stuff, and that's what I worry about right now in this moment, is the social stuff with my kids. My daughter's going into 8th grade. Middle school is a time where you're growing up in so many ways with girls and boys and everything else, and like that's all washed away. So we're trying to create some normalcy at the middle of this moment and keep their social interactions up. But culturally, I don't want them to grow up thinking like this is the way it is, you know. And maybe it's irredeemable, and maybe it will end up being the way it is. But I think to the extent I can tell them not to lose sleep over the way things are going right now, or the way people are talking to each other, and just kind of turn down the temperature on everything. I try to do that without sugarcoating it. The pandemic is terrible. People we know are sick. People have died in our town and, you know, in our city. And yes, all those stores are boarded up in our neighborhood, and that stuff is all scary. You know, it feels like a third world country in some places. But just trying to project optimism the way a child should have optimism, without sugarcoating what's actually going on in the country right now, which isn't great, as you may have noticed.
I really appreciate how you put that, Willie. I mean, you've been kind of a spirit animal for me and a role model for me as a dad. I remember when my first son was born and you and I were texting, you said to me once, it only gets better.
Yeah.
And the couple pieces of advice or wisdom that I've gotten that always stuck with me, because you were right. I was like, man, 3 months old is so amazing. And then 1 year old is so amazing. And you go through blips, right? Like there've been some challenging times with tantrums and, you know, and especially raising kids in this environment, but you really, really, and I know it comes from your dad, and you and Christina have such a loving family, but it was really helpful to me. And I know that people who watch you get that warmth from watching you and the subtle example that you put out there. But I want to ask you to build on that too. Any other parental advice that was either given to you or that you would give to others that you think is especially helpful now?
Yeah, I mean, I think what my wife has always been really good at, keeping calm. You know, I've seen it started actually, we joke, literally the day my daughter was born 13 years ago, on June 14th, 2007, you're a first time parent, you don't know what to do. The hospital has handed you the keys to this car that you're totally unqualified to drive.
Right.
And I remember like, okay, what do we do? Okay, we got the diapers, we got all the things. And without getting graphic, my daughter, who was hours old, like went to the bathroom, and I was like, okay, what do we do? And I'm like, okay, I got to get the thing. And I looked over at Christina, and she was looking at her, smiling. She goes, oh, your little body is working. And I was like, oh, like she had some calm in her that I had to learn from, that it was like, we're okay. Like we're relatively smart people. We're competent people. Far less competent people than we are have done this. We're going to be okay. So I think she set that standard for calm, and we've tried to keep that in our house. She and I don't yell at each other. We don't create that energy inside your house. And if you've got a disagreement, you guys can handle it, but don't project that onto your kids, because then they get that anxiety and that kind of tension. And I'm not talking about fighting. We don't like get into fights. I just mean in general, if there's conflict, if there's a problem, hey, let's talk about it. We had a couple days ago, my kids, I don't know what, they were mad at each other. And we just sat them down on the couch and said, what the hell's going on here, guys? What happened? And Lucy said, well, okay, don't say it like that. Chill. And she said, well, I just don't like it. And he goes, okay, I didn't know you didn't like that. And that was it. It was like 7 minutes and we walked away from it. So I think it's sort of like our political culture. Everything doesn't need to be turned up to 11 all the time. I think if you can manage things with calm, and conflicts will come up and adversity will come up that doesn't always lend itself to calm, but to the extent you can keep your household calm. And I also would say what my dad passed on to me just by osmosis is to have a sense of humor about things. That's, especially in these few months, that's made a huge difference. When you're bumping into each other in the kitchen every 10 minutes, and you might be, oh, it's you again. And, oh, okay. When the sort of novelty and the magic is worn off, if you have humor in your relationship with your wife, your husband, and your kids, you can go to that. You can fall back on that. You can enjoy each other's company by just messing around. So I think calm and humor definitely get us through a lot.
Thank you for that. That's really important and insightful, and even more than I could have hoped for in an answer from Willie Geist. I think you got a Dad of the Year award at one point.
I did. I don't know what the standard was for that, but I did. Yes, I did get that. Yeah.
Well, it was well earned. But you even, we said this in the first show, even you get angry, right? And this is a time where a lot of folks are angry, righteously angry. I've said it before, if you're not angry, you're not paying attention, especially right now. We've got this bounty gate going on. We've got the coronavirus. We've got crazy shit every single day. And when I asked you a year and a little more ago about what made you angry, we were talking about Puerto Rico. So it's like just so much has changed in that a year and a little bit ago, Puerto Rico was the big story. We couldn't have imagined where we'd be now. But I still think it's important to have this discussion about anger and about how to channel it into something positive, because that is a natural reaction. So updated answer, Willie Geist, what makes you angry now?
I'm angry at the complete lack of urgency by government.
Hold on, I got a noise there, Willie. I don't know if that was yours or mine. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Let me ask you again. Is that cool?
Yeah.
So Willie Geist, what makes you angry now?
I'm angry that government at every level isn't showing more urgency for this massive crisis that's burning its way across the country. It's like we decided, because the coronavirus got tamped down in New York after the horrors we saw in our city, that it was time to move on. I'm not talking about us. I'm talking about the federal government saying, all right, everything the president has said since January forward about moving on, it's magically going to disappear, and sort of wishing this away, refusing to wear masks, all the things that we're seeing out of our leadership, and not treating this like for many people, an existential crisis that it is. That's not even, angry is not even the word. That's like criminal negligence. I mean, this is people are dying. It's happening again. It's happening in Los Angeles County right now. It's happening in Texas. It's happening in Georgia. It's happening in Arizona. It's popping up. And by the way, in exactly the way that all these public health experts and officials who work for the White House said it would. They said, we'll get it under control in these hot spots in the epicenters, New York, New Jersey, up there. But it's going to come. It's going to make its way across the country. And the minute we let our guard down and we start to reopen everything and throw caution to the wind, that's when we're most vulnerable and exposed. So I think President Trump, to be generous, doesn't understand leadership. He doesn't understand, by the way, you sort of, with him, as we were talking about, you sort of have to put things in terms of how does it help him. If he had come out from the beginning and been this big crisis manager and this big leader that he pretended he was on The Apprentice and everything else, that would be a win. If he came out and made the mask thing like, hey guys, I don't like it either. If you wear the mask, guess what? We open the restaurants sooner. We're going to football games in the fall. We got this. Why not? And why not? Because he thought that the very existence of the coronavirus hurt his political prospects. And so he was going to wish it away, which was naive. Again, is too nice a word. It's outrageous. So the anger I see and feel every day as we report on these stories is that we wake up and it's another day where we haven't made this like a national urgent 24/7 mission to get tests out, to make sure everybody's wearing a mask, to race toward a vaccine, which a lot of good people are working on right now. You couldn't think of anything more urgent, and it's like many people in the government just want to pretend it's gone. You can't click your heels and close your eyes and have this thing go away. And it's going to keep sprouting up if people say, you know what, we've moved past it, don't worry about the mask, go out, live your life. I don't like this. Believe me, I want to be hanging out with you. I want to be going to football games this fall. I want my kids in school in September. But we're not going to get there if we go on like this. And we've lost so much time if you go back to January, that is truly maddening. And I think history will frown on it and sort of reveal how devastating, how catastrophic it has been.
100%. I think I appreciate that breakdown. It's a 9/11 moment, right? Like Bush had a moment after 9/11 to get everybody together, to inspire the nation, to mobilize us in response to a threat, right?
Yeah.
And Trump had that same opportunity and he blew it, right?
Yeah.
He had the opportunity to even like pull out his jacked up candidate, his presidency, to turn it around, to actually get people behind him. And he blew it. And whether it was because he was selfish or because he's too stupid to understand, or, you know, the leadership failure, I think, is really important, Willie, because for me, leadership is about prioritization, especially in government.
Yeah.
And if you don't prioritize the right things and have a process and counsel to prioritize the right things and then put energy and resources behind them, then you fail as a leader, right? Like Trump chose not to prioritize the virus. And that, in my view, should have been number one. Right. And then the protest number two, and then number three, something else. Right. But and recognizing that it all endangers our national security, which is his number one priority, keep Americans safe. And we're not safe right now. Right. We're not safe. Our people aren't safe. Our kids aren't safe. Our military, nobody's safe right now. I would argue we've never been less safe. But your breakdown is clear. Your leadership is clear. I'm going to ask you again, would you ever run for office? You may not see it behind me. I've started putting an Easter egg in the screen back here, and I change it up, and over my shoulder,
for mayor,
it says Willie for mayor. Andrew Yang has not jumped in. I think he would clear the field if he did. It's still a disparate, convoluted landscape for mayor. You spent more time in New York than de Blasio. You are beloved in New York more than de Blasio. You are a unifier. You are a healer. You are a healer. If Biden is a healer on the national level, you could be a hero on a more local level. Willie, will you please run for mayor?
Absolutely not. But I appreciate the sign. I admire the time you took with the sign. I just noticed it. I was so focused on the bourbon next to the sign that I totally missed the sign. I don't think so. Why don't you run for? You're Paul Rieckhoff. You're the one who should be running for something. Come on.
You know, I am so not built for that job right now.
Yeah, I don't think I am either. I also think like,
and I'm also, frankly, I don't think this is the no shit. A Democrat is going to win.
Yeah.
I am not a Democrat. I'm an independent politically, and I'm not willing to compromise that to run for office. Right. And I don't know if a white person can get elected in New York right now. I mean, I think the city is looking for a change in all ways, shapes, and forms. And I think, Sean Donahue is struggle to get traction. I don't even know if Corey Johnson, the Speaker of the House, is going to get the kind of traction. Jumanji Williams is getting traction. He might be the person of the moment right now. Could be Letitia James. I think Letitia James has been formidable. And if she comes in late as the AG, I think New York really wants to see a visual change and a philosophical change. And unless it's an outsider with a ton of money, and that probably gets held against you too, I think they're looking for somebody who's really going to shake shit up. De Blasio was lucky. He was in the right moment at the right time, and he's fucked up every day since. But what's your, let
me just say, I admire, we have mutual friends. I'm thinking of our buddy Wes Moore, for example.
You took the words out of my mouth.
He and I respect everybody's personal reasons for wanting to or not wanting to. He's still a young guy too. He may well, but the ringer that you go through, and this sort of become cliche, but you go through, that's the attacks, the unfair stuff, the stuff in your past that's not really a story, but they make a story, you put your kids through it, all that's tough enough. And now in New York City, you're walking into such a tough environment. I know we're half kidding about my running or you're running for mayor, but whoever walks into that job, I mean, I mentioned we had de Blasio on today, and I said, with this budget, you've managed to please no one. So the people who wanted real police change didn't get anything. And now you pissed off the people who say, why did you take all this money out of the police budget? It didn't accomplish anything. So, but that's in other words, you go into these jobs and you're getting shredded either way based on what you do. So you just do what you think is right. And I'm not sure he did that. I think he tried to placate two people with two sides with one budget and ended up placating nobody with it.
That's de Blasio in a nutshell. He tries to make everybody happy and he makes nobody happy. And he always does it too slow and too weakly. Somebody told me when I was in Iraq once, they said, the only thing that united people was Saddam. and their hatred for Saddam. And then when Saddam left, they were united against the Americans.
Right.
So like Americans are kind of united against Trump. And the only thing that unites New Yorkers now is de Blasio. Like he's the only thing that brings everyone together is their unified hatred for him. But I'm glad you mentioned West, because I think he's become a man of the moment.
Yeah.
You know, if Biden hadn't committed to a woman, it would be a viable thing to talk about Wes Moore as a VP candidate potentially, right? Like he has got all the ingredients for this moment, his understanding, his expertise, his bio. And I think there is this new moment for rising leaders, but I gotta ask you real quick about the VP candidacy, right? This is going to be a big moment, probably the biggest moment before the fall. Yeah. You had Tammy Duckworth on this week. She's now rumored. I mean, do you have a prediction? I know you probably can't make an endorsement, right? Who you think would be the best candidate, but you're a sports fan, you're a betting person.
Yeah.
And who do you think is going to, I'll ask you a two-part question. One, who do you think will be the VP candidate? And do you think we'll have any sports before the end of the year at all?
Oh man, I hope so. I'll take your first question first. I think at the end of the day, campaigns are risk averse, especially one that appears to be leading the way it is. And I think Kamala Harris is probably, the campaign views her as the safest bet. In their eyes, she's a United States senator. She ran for president. She's well known. I think she'll pass the executive test in the eyes of some voters and in the Biden campaign. But there are some really interesting, I think Val Demings is incredibly impressive, especially in this moment. She was the chief of police in Orlando, now the congresswoman from Florida. We've had her on. She's really, really smart and understands the dynamic of what's happening in the country right now in a way that she brings a different perspective to it. Susan Rice is a name that's been out there, but if you were telling me to lay money as a bettor, I'd put it on Kamala Harris. I think a lot of people also are looking at this with no disrespect, as Joe Biden's going to be 78 years old. If he wins and he's sworn into office, he'll be 78 on inauguration day. And they're looking at like, who's next? You know, because he could, it's not totally inconceivable that he says, hey, one term, I'm going to do one term. I want to get us past Trump and then hand the baton to somebody else. Can people see that next person sliding in 4 years, 8 years at the most, but 4 years? And I think for a lot of Democratic voters, whatever problems some of them do have, and those, believe me, popped up during the campaign, they can see that in her. And they may not know Val Demings well enough to make that determination. But, I mean, the truth is, if you think about it, if you're a Democratic voter, if you're not energized enough to go out and vote by the fact that you're voting to get Donald Trump out of office, this is for Democrats, I don't think the running mate makes that much of a difference, to be honest with you. I mean, this is about Donald Trump, let's be honest. So, so I think the money is on Kamala, but you know what? People have said, well, you know, what about McCain with Sarah Palin? But that was they had to pull something out of their hat because they were behind, you know? And so that Biden's not in that position, so he may play it safe. Sports, God, I hope. God. I mean, that, you know, we've missed that so much, both of my kids. Thank God for the Jordan doc, you know, that got us through some time.
Yeah, we had David Aldridge on the show to break that down. It was such a great moment and a good thing to share with families, right? Like, did you watch it with George?
Yeah, we watched it. My sister actually works at ESPN. She was one of the executives.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So Last Dance, and what I loved about it too is it wasn't all released at once. It was that old school feeling of, ooh, it's Sunday, you know?
Yeah.
We got to eat dinner first. We got to be in place. Because the kids would watch the episode from last week before the new one because they couldn't stay up late the week before. So we'd watch 2 hours of it together, and it was awesome. But that was our only real taste of sports. So I hope baseball begins this. I'm, like you, a huge football fan. I'm just praying we get some sort of football. But can you imagine like Auburn or Alabama, LSU with 20,000 people scattered around, and it's kind of echoey in the stadium? And the things that make sports great, the energy around them in the stadium, everything else will be stripped away. But to be honest with you, Christina says all it takes for me to watch something on TV is two people in different colored shirts running at each other, and we're chasing a ball around. She's like, who's this now? I'm like, oh, this is the 1996 Sugar Bowl.
Yeah.
She's like, why are you watching? I was like, oh, it was on. It's
two
teams with different colored shirts chasing a ball. So I hope so. I hope the NBA gets off the ground. I think, you know, you're seeing some guys who are like it just ain't worth it. You know, if you're going to pay me anyway, and I'm not going in the bubble and risking me and my family, I'm just going to sit this out. And it's a shortened season that's always going to have an asterisk next to it. So, but I hope that for a fan's sake, I hope we get something. I need football at least. What do you think?
I'm not optimistic. I don't think we're going to get sports. I think they're going to start and stop and start and stop. And just because of the direction of the pandemic and where it's hitting, I mean, there's no way you're going to have, something in Alabama or Louisiana or California. Right. So, I think you're going to see this series of starts and stops. And the reality is that the unions are pretty strong in some of these sports. Yeah. And if they are still getting paid, they're going to hold out. They've held out before when times are good. Baseball, part of why I lost my deep love for baseball is because of so many shutdowns and strikes, right? And Don Mattingly never got his World Series ring, right? But I think, baseball has always got the hardest players union and all negotiations always break down. So even if they get it going, I think I think all across the country, it's going to hit harder and lower. And we've got to hit that rock bottom before people get to a reality and we get a reset. Yeah. So I'm not optimistic, man, but I am optimistic
I'm sorry, my microwave keeps dinging on you.
Is that what it is? Your microwave keeps dinging?
It's text messages, but I can't. It's muted on my phone, but it's dinging.
See, I love this. This is real because I thought it might be you have a burrito waiting.
I wish.
Or it's the Verizon people. You think they were Verizon setting up those phone lines? It was Trump and the NSA.
Same people behind Rumerator. They're all working together.
It wasn't really Charlize Theron that you interviewed. It was an imposter. It was a Russian imposter that wanted access to the inside of your garage, man.
They're in. They're on the inside.
I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you. But it's weird too because you guys use what do you guys use? You guys use FaceTime or Skype. And then CNN uses this Cisco thing. Everybody uses some different shit. And I'm, because I'm not on a network, I bounce around. And it's it's kind of like Russian roulette, trying to figure out which technology platform I'm going to use every time I do an interview. At least you got some consistency there, man.
I've been filling in this week with Jenna Bush Hager on her. This is the 4th hour of the Today Show with Hoda. And man, they are piecing that thing together with Scotch tape. We started the show. Let's see if I have this right. We did something on Skype. And then they said, okay, now we're switching to Zoom.
Yeah.
And then we did FaceTime. So within the space of one show, we were on 3 different platforms. It's you've got to remember where the login is. It's crazy.
Dylan Dreyer's a friend of ours and her son and my son hang out and they've been trying to figure it out too. And I'm talking to her husband about how they're trying to rig this stuff. And I'm glad she's back because she is just like a voice of light. Awesome. In America, right? But all of us are trying to figure it out. Let me ask you one last question, which I asked you last time. Is give us something, please, Willie, that makes you happy. And I know your family makes you happy, but what's something that's keeping you happy through these hard times? A touchstone for you that makes you happy.
Besides the bourbon, would you say?
You can go with bourbon.
What's making me happy? I'm glad you asked this. So because we looked at this summer. And summer camps were closed. And we're like, what are we doing this summer? So I went, there's a lake not far from here.
It's okay. It's I don't know. Every time it dings, that's your poll ratings going up in New York.
I would love to turn it off. I just don't know how. Anyway, so there's a little lake near our house. And I looked at the summer and I thought, what are we going to do with this summer? What's going to be our thing? We can't see people the way we want to. We're not going to travel. So I went and bought a little boat, small boat. And I get up there. If the kids are out doing something, it's 30 minutes from here. I'll drive up there. It's a power boat. And I get out there on the lake and it's a couple of hours. I'm not even looking at my phone except for changing the song. The wind's blowing on you. You're up there and it's just pure. It's, the cool water and the mountains and the trees. And it's just total peace and solitude, and the world we're living in is nowhere near there. It can't touch you there. Work can't touch you. The demands of what you have to do for the show that day are left behind. So I hadn't considered your question, but the minute you said it, I went to that happy place, especially if you go when the sun's about to go down or even early in the morning and it's totally flat and you shoot way up the lake where there are no other boats and no other people. And you're just you feel blessed, you feel lucky, and that's when you start thinking about all the that's when the good stuff comes through. You know, you think about
Mm.
your own family, you think about the love and blessings in your life, and hoping that we can come out on the other side of this, all of this, better than we are right now.
You give us hope that we can. We are blessed to know you. You make us happy. You make a lot of Americans happy. You are a great ambassador for our country. For all those looking in from the outside who are terrified by what Trump is doing, they can look to Willie Geist as a source of hope and inspiration and calm. I gave you gifts last time. I'm gonna give you gifts again. I'm gonna do it real quick. You get more Angry Americans gear.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I think I sent you pictures. My kids all have one of those T-shirts.
Really?
His favorite shirt. Yeah.
They're really comfy, right?
Great. I don't know what you're making those out of, but that's a high quality T-shirt.
Made by the veterans of Oscar Mike in America. So every time you buy one of those, it supports American jobs. It actually does.
Good.
And then I gave you peeps last time, but did I ask you to pick a color?
I think, did we just do the classic yellow?
I think I just gave it to you and you said classic yellow, right? But I'm giving you more peeps because ever since then, we've been keeping it up. Every single guest has told us their favorite color of peeps and why. So you still going with yellow?
Yeah, I'm going to go with yellow just as a classic. I don't want to be boring, but I'm a classic kind of guy.
Great. We now have a generous sponsor, Bravo Sierra, that makes incredible health and wellness products and grooming products. I can get you some antibacterial wipes to go on the boat.
Can't have enough of those.
And some deodorant for your next interview with Charlize Theron's imposter. And then Uncle Nearest. You talked about bourbon. Got some amazing premium whiskey from Uncle Nearest coming your way.
Oh my God!
Jeffrey Wright turned us on to this. It's awesome, and they are a generous supporter of the show now. So we've come a little bit of a ways. Now we have whiskey that we can actually give people from a very cool brand with great value.
Because when I came with the first episode, when I was there after I went to the Polish consulate, we had peeps and bourbon together. But now it's official.
We're staying with it, man. Like you set the tone, you set the template, and we've been running with that ever since. And because it's 4th of July coming up, I'm gonna get you a red, white, and blue flask.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
that is awesome.
It says red, white, and booze.
That's fantastic.
So you could take it on the boat, and you could.
I didn't realize I was getting all this, man.
Yeah, man. I'm not going to ask you to play the drums to take us out.
I can't. I would. I can't. I have like his sticks are right here.
Can you twirl drumsticks?
No, that's his. Again, I'm the manager. I'm the business manager.
You're a very good manager. This could be a lot worse than having you. Next time I see you, we'll take my Camaro, your boat, and I'll teach you how to spin drumsticks.
Yes, I need to. Dude, I'm so happy to see how far this has come in just over a year. When we were sitting up in that room in front of the whiteboard, we weren't sure where it was headed. Now it's part of the conversation. People are checking it out. You're getting amazing guests, and I think you're channeling what the country's feeling. So congratulations on that, and congratulations on your soon-to-be 10 out of 10 room rating. That's a beautiful show.
Well, thank you, my friend. I appreciate you very much. I just want you to know you've had our back from the beginning. You've had my back from the beginning. And all the work I've done over the years, and especially launching this new venture, I don't think there's anybody who's been more supportive than you, of me, of my family. So I'm very, very grateful for your friendship, but also in this moment, grateful for the energy you're bringing to this country, man. I love you. I appreciate you. You're a great American, and I hope you're gonna keep your shorts on, because I know you don't have long pants on probably. Get on the boat and go out there and enjoy it and stay frosty, man.
Paul, you're the best, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you, my brother.
Okay.